The artifact is 150,000 years old. It's made of an artificial metal we have been unable to identify. There is a message scratched on the front. What does it say? This is a horror podcast. Consider yourselves warned. PseudoPod, episode 548, June 23rd, 2017. This week's story, Lord Randy, My Son, by Joe L. Hensley. Hello everyone, welcome to PseudoPod, the weekly horror podcast. I'm Alasdair, your host, and this week's story was first printed in Dangerous Visions in 1967, and appears here with the kind permission of the Hensley estate and the Virginia Kid Agency. This is the second of Harlan Ellison's Dangerous Visions to appear here on PseudoPod. Do go check out Go 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 Said the Bird by Sonya Dorman to hear the first. Joe Hensley was a lawyer, prosecuting attorney, member of the Indiana General Assembly, circuit court judge, science fiction fan, and writer of science fiction and mysteries. While working as a law student, lawyer, legislator, and judge, Hensley wrote science fiction and crime fiction, and at least one auto racing story for a pulp magazine as Joe L. Hensley and Louis J. A. Adams. His first fiction sale was the short story And Not Quite Human, published in the September 1953 issue of Beyond Fantasy. His first fiction sale was the short story And Not Quite Human, published in the September 1953 issue of Beyond Fantasy Fiction, also reprinted in PseudoPod in April of last year. His first published novel was The Color of Hate in 1960, and 20 more novels and collections followed, over half of them in the series featuring Indiana Circuit Judge Donald Roback, which began with 1971's Deliver Us to Evil. He also wrote around 100 short stories. His collaborators in SF included Alexei Panshin and Harlan Ellison. He co-wrote one mystery novel, Loose Coins, with fellow Indiana prosecuting attorney Guy M. Townsend, and his last novel, Snowbird's Blood, was published in February 2008. Many of his mystery novels were set in the fictitious Bington, a place which combined aspects of Madison and Bloomington. Hensley remained active in SF fandom throughout his life. The Hensleys were familiar faces at science fiction conventions such as RiverCon and MidwestCon. In fact, Hensley was a first fandom dinosaur, a term used in this instance to mean he had been active in fandom prior to July 4th, 1939, and received the first Fandom Hall of Fame award in 2006. Your reader for this story is Ben Phillips, who is one of my heroes. There is really no other way to describe that. Ben is responsible for me coming aboard at PseudoPod close to a decade ago. He taught me how to be an editor. He taught me how to be a producer. He taught me everything about professionalism and how to engage with stories on a weekly basis that I still use to this day. He is the best of the best, and I am delighted beyond words that we've been able to persuade him to pick the mic up and do this brief and very welcome comeback tour. Good to have you back aboard, buddy. So, get ready, because we have a story for you, and we promise you, it's true.
Lord Randy, My Son, by Joe L. Hensley. He rebelled on the night the call came to leave the warm and liquid place. But in that way, he was weak and nature was strong. Outside, the rains came, a storm so formidable that forecasters referred to it for all of the time that was left. He fought to remain with the mother thing, but the mother thing expelled him, and in fear and rage he hurt the mother thing subtly. Black clouds hid the stars, and the trees bent only to the wind. The night before, Sam Moore had let his son Randall play late in the yard, if play it was. The boy had no formal games, and the neighborhood children shunned the area of the Moore house. Sometimes a child would yell at the boy insultingly from some hidden place, but mostly now they stayed away. Sam sat in the Chase lounge and watched dully, trapped in the self-pity of writing his own obituary, asking the timeless questions, "Who were you? What did you ever do? And why me? Why me now?" He watched the child with concealed revulsion. Randall moved quietly along the back line of hedges, his small boy eyes watchful of the other yards that bordered his own. There had been a time when it was a fetish with the neighborhood children to fling a rock when passing, before the two Swihart boys, running away after disposing of their missiles, had fallen into a well no one had even known existed in the corner lot. Too bad about them, but Randall lived with the remembrance of the rocks and appeared to distrust the amnesty. Sam watched as the boy continued his patrol. The pain within had been worse on that day, and Sam longed for the forgetfulness of sleep. Finally, it was time. The first one came in silence, and the memories of that night are lost in time. That one grew easily and alone, for only later life is chronicled. His people migrated, and memory flickered into a mass of legends, but the blood was there. Item: the old man had gardened in the neighborhood for several years. He was a bent man with a soft, broken-toothed smile, bad English, and a remembrance of things past. Swastikas, yellow stars, Buchenwald. Now and then he wrote simple poems and sent them to the local newspaper, and once they had printed one. He was a friendly old man, and he spoke to everyone, including one of the teenage neighborhood queens. She chose to misunderstand him and reported his friendliness as something more. On that day, a year gone now, the old man had been digging at rose bushes in the front yard of the house across the street. Randall had watched, sucking at a peppermint stick the old man had given him, letting the juice run from the corners of his mouth. The black car had squealed to a stop, and the three purposeful boys gotten out. They wore yellow sweaters. On the back of each sweater, an eagle had been cunningly worked into the material, so that the woven wings seemed to take new flight as shoulders moved. Each boy carried a chainsaw band with a black-taped handle. Randall watched them with growing interest, not really understanding yet. They beat the old man with powerful tackle football arms, and he had cowered away, crying out in a guttural foreign tongue. It was over quickly. The old man lay crumpled and bleeding in the rich, dark dirt. The boys piled back into the black car and peeled away at high speed. Randall could hear the sounds of their laughter, like pennants, fluttering after them. 2 blocks away, the land was not suitable for building. There was a steep hill. The tire blew there, and the black car went over the hill gaining speed. It cartwheeled down, spouting enormous geysers of flame, a miniature Ferris wheel gone mad, and fire gushed out with an overpowering, roaring sound that almost blocked out the screams. In the morning, Sam Moore awoke unrefreshed. On that Saturday, the housekeeper babysitter came on time for a change, and he left them sitting in the family room. The television was blaring a bloody war movie where men died in appalling numbers. Randall was seated, legs crossed, on the floor in front of the television, watching avidly. Mrs. Cable watched the screen and refused to meet Sam's glance, lost in her own bitter world. There'd been a time when Sam had issued instructions before leaving, but those days were gone. Not very many women would care for a retarded child. Now, enmeshed in his own problem, and really not caring much, he said little. If the watching was casual and the safety of the boy only probable, he had still carried out the formal social necessities of child care. He looked at the boy, and something within him darkened. Anne had been brilliant, and her pregnancy had been normal, but the birth had been difficult and the boy a monstrous problem. She had changed. The boy had not. Early tests on him had been negative, but physically, there had always been a lack of interest, slow movement, eyes that could track and follow but did not. He could not force himself to approach the boy this morning. "Goodbye," he said, and received a brief look upward with minor recognition involved. A boy is only 3 once, but what happens when he's 3 and 8 at the same time? When he will be 3 forever. On the television screen, a dark-skinned soldier dragged his white captain from the path of an onrushing tank. Sam remembered the script. It was one of Hollywood's message films. Comradeship would continue until the dark-skinned one needed another kind of help. Outside, he failed to notice the loveliness of the day. He stood in front of the garage and considered. With the rolling door down, the garage was tight. He could start the car, and it would be easy. That was what Anne, his wife, had done, but for a different reason and in a different way. She'd swallowed a box of sleeping pills when he was out of town trying a case. That had been a long time ago, after the hospitals and clinics, after the last of the faith healers with their larcenous, sickening morality, the confident, grasping herbalists, the slick charlatans and quacks to whom in desperation she'd taken the boy. 4 years now. No one had examined Randall since. She'd never really been there after Randall was born. She'd wandered on for a while, large, sensitive eyes looking out from some faraway place, her mind a cluttered dustbin of what might have been. "Just don't touch me," she had said. "I know they said we ought to have another, but don't. Please, Sam." And that which was still partially alive in him had died. He knew it was the boy. Now, it wasn't that he'd not loved her, but he could recall her face, only in the boy's face, in that small and hateful visage, that face that had killed the thing Sam loved. He rolled up the garage door with a clang and drove to his law office. Another day, perhaps another $1. There weren't many days left now. Dr. Yancey had said 6 months to a year, and that had been more than 4 months ago. On the day they had opened Sam more and quickly sutured him again to hide the corrupt mass inside. "Too far along," Yancey had said, and then added the old words of despair that many men finally hear. "Nothing we can do." Siddhartha Gautama came easily in the park with the remembrance of elephants. Legends say that the trees bowed to him. His mother, Maya, felt sustained by an intense feeling of power. The blood was strong, but the child was slow and sheltered, and the fulfillment never reached, the gift grown into vagueness, never fully used. Item. Randall sat under a tree in front of the Moore-house. He watched the world around him with curious intensity. A honeybee flew near, and he watched the creature with some concern, but it did not attack. They didn't bother him much since that one had stung him in the spring, and he'd destroyed them all for a 10-block radius. He could hear the loud noise long before he could tell from where it came. A sound truck blared close by. In a few moments it came to Randall's corner and slowed. On its side there was a garish picture of a man in priestly robes holding a rifle in front of his chest, eyes flashing fire. The sign below said, "Father Tempest fights communism." Music boomed over the speakers, decibels above the permitted limits. Randall held his ears. The sound hurt. The driver cut the music back and turned up the volume for his hand microphone. "Big rally tonight," he called. "Hear Father Tempest save the world and tell you how to fight the infiltrators who would destroy us. High school gym, 7 o'clock. The voice took on a threatening note. "Don't let your neighbors be there without you." In the other seat beside the driver, a man in priestly robes smiled and made beneficent gestures as people came to doors and windows. Overhead, there were sudden clouds, and a few drops of rain fell. Lightning bolted from the sky, missed the tall trees, and made a direct hit on the sound truck. Silence came, and Randall removed his hands from his ears. People ran into the street, and in a while, Randall could hear a siren. He left the front yard and went to the window at the side. From there he could see Mrs. Cable. She had somehow managed to sleep through it all. Her mouth hung open and she snored with an easy rhythm. The television was still on, hot with a soap opera now. Randall began to pace the back hedge fence, guarding it. There'd been one boy who'd appeared friendly and would smile at Randall and then slyly do little things of pinching and hitting when no one watched. That was the boy with the BB gun who shot the squirrel that took the bits of food from Randall's hand. The boy who killed one of the fish in the fish pond. The squirrel still lived, but it was more cautious now. And there were still 3 fish in the pond. There had always been 3 except for that one day. One of the fish now was not quite the same color and shape as the others. The big dog came into the yard through the hedge, and they frisked together. Randall smiled at the dog. "Nice dog," he said. A stump of tail waved in adoration. Sam spent a dreary day in the office, snapping at his secretary, being remote to clients. Now he was not as busy as he'd once been. He refused cases that might drag. Partly it was the alien thing that grew inside, but partly, and he had a sort of sullen pride about it, there was the matter of being too good at his job. He'd surrounded himself with that job when Anne had gone, merged into it. Now he refused the proffered retainers to defend or prosecute that which he knew he wouldn't live to see. It was a minor ethical point, but a man takes greater cognizance of minor points when he begins to die. His own decisions grew harder to make, and clients read it in his eyes and voice. The motley mob that had once invaded his office fell to a whisper, and soon there was time. He thought about the boy. He knew he'd ignored the child after Anne's death, and worse, he'd hated the boy, relating it back to Anne, knowing that her suicide was a product of what the boy was. The newspaper offered escape. The world grew more sour daily, and so seemed easier to leave. Today, 2 more countries had quit the United Nations. Sweden reported increased fallout. There was indecisiveness over a new test ban. 2 African nations announced the development of their own bombs. In Mississippi, a member of a fanatical white organization had shot and killed a circuit judge who'd sentenced 9 men accused and convicted of lynching a civil rights worker. In his own state, an amendment to the state constitution outlawing the death penalty had lost by a wide margin. On the way home, there was an ache in his back that had never been there before. Ching Tsai dreamed deeply on the night of coming. The Chi Lin appeared to her. She dreamed and missed the dragons that walked the quiet skies. Once again, the child was slow and sheltered and kept apart. Item: Mrs. Cable slept on, keeping away from prime time, which was reserved for westerns, giveaway shows, comedies, and the like. The television presented a program on a housing development in New York. They showed the tenements that were being replaced. They showed the narrow streets and the tired and dirty people. Cameras cleverly watched as the buildings came down and high-rise, low-rent apartments were built. The reporter's voice was flat and laconic. Crime continued in the rebuilt area. The favorite now was to catch the rent collector in the elevator, strip him, and jam small change up his rectum. Rape increased, for the apartments were better soundproofed than the old tenements. Randall watched. The people still looked tired and dirty. After the documentary, there was another soap opera. Mrs. Cable came awake, and they watched together. This one was about a man and woman who were in love, and who were married, but unfortunately not to each other. The house was hot and empty. Sam went to the open window and saw them. Mrs. Cable was stretched out on the chaise lounge, a paper held over her eyes to block the fierce sun. Randall was at the goldfish pond that Sam had constructed in a happier year. 3 hardy goldfish had outlived the last harsh winter and the indifferent spring. What they subsisted on, Sam could not guess. He knew that he didn't feed them. The boy held small hands over the pool, and Sam watched covertly. It was as if the child felt Sam's eyes on him, for he turned his head and smiled directly at the window. Then he turned again to the pool, trailing quick hands in the water. The right one came up gently grasping a goldfish. The boy passed it from hand to hand, inspecting it as it wriggled, then dropped it into the water, and the hand sought another. It was something that Sam had never seen before, but the boy did it with an air as if it were an often repeated act. Randall had an affinity for animals. Sam remembered the incident of the dog. The back neighbors owned a large and cantankerous German shepherd that had been a neighborhood terror since acquisition. Once, when Randall made one of his periodic runaways, Sam had come upon the boy huddled against the dog. Sam stood watching, half expecting the animal, which its owners normally kept carefully chained, to rend and tear. But the dog made no overt move, and only whined when Sam took the boy away. Lately, the dog's conduct must have improved with age, for Sam had seen it playing happily about the neighborhood. He made up a check and took it out to Mrs. Cable. It paid her for the week, and she took it with good grace. Payday was the only time she unbent and showed any real desire to talk. "Lots of excitement," she said. "Lightning hit a truck right down the street. I was asleep, but Mrs. Talbot was telling me 2 men killed." She shook her head in wonder. "Right down the street, and I missed it." She nodded at Randall. "He's coming along. He does things he didn't used to do. Those mean little ones that used to throw rocks don't come close anymore. He used to try to run to them and give them his toys, but he just watches now if he sees one. They stay away when he's outside." She shook her head. "He still don't talk much, but sometimes he'll say something right out loud and clear when I ain't expecting it." She laughed her whinny laugh. "It's a shame nothing can be done for him. You still trying to get him in that state dumb school?" Sam fought the pain inside. "Not much use," he said shortly. "They're full. He's way down the list to get in." He escorted her to the front door. On most days she kept conversation to a minimum, but today she wouldn't run down. "He's sure quick. There's a squirrel up in one of them trees. I turned my back and he was up there feeding it. I thought you said that old elm was rotten." Sam nodded. Every movement sent a wave of pain up his back. "Well, he climbed up it, and I had a dickens of a time getting him down. Don't seem rotten to me," she grumbled. It was rotten. It had died this spring and never come out in leaves. Sam could see it vaguely out the back window. The other trees were in full leaf. He imagined he could see buds and small leaves on the elm, but he knew he must be wrong. He finally got Mrs. Cable out the door and called Doc Yancey. When that was done, he eased gingerly into a chair. The pain receded slightly. The boy sat on the floor watching him with a child's curious intentness, head cocked slightly, completely without embarrassment. Sam admitted to himself that the boy was handsome. His features were regular, his body wiry and strong. Once, Sam had visited the state mentally retarded home, and the eyes of the children there were what he most remembered. Most of those eyes had been dull and without luster. A few of the eyes had been foolers. Randall's eyes were foolers. They were bright with the brightness of cold snow, but they lacked involvement with the world around him. "You hurt, Father?" Randall questioned. He made a tiny gesture with one hand, as if he were testifying and had found a sudden truth and was surprised by it. "You hurt, Father," he said again. He pointed out the window. "All hurt," he said. "Yes," Sam said. "The whole world hurts." The boy turned away as Sam heard the car in the drive. It was Dr. Yancey. The man came in with brisk steps, and Sam had a moment of quick, consuming hatred for the other man, the solid green envy of the sick for the well. Dr. Yancey spoke first to the boy. "Hello, Randy. How are you today?" For a moment, Sam did not think the boy would answer. Randall looked at the doctor without particular interest. "I am young," he said finally, in falsetto. "He says that sometimes to people," Sam said. "I think he means he's all right." Yancey went into the kitchen and brought back water and a yellow capsule. "This won't put you under." He handed the capsule and water to Sam, and Sam downed them dutifully. He let Yancey help him from the chair to the couch. Expert fingers probed him. The boy watched with some interest. "You're swollen, but there aren't any real signs of serious organ failure. You really ought to be in a hospital." "Not yet," Sam said softly. "There's the boy." He looked up at Yancey. "How long, Doc?" He asked it, not really wanting to know, and yet wanting to know. "Not very long now, Sam. I think the cancer's spread to the spine." He kept his voice low and turned to see if the boy was listening. Randall got up from the floor. He moved quietly and gracefully out of the room and down the hall. A light clicked on in the study. "He's sort of unnerving," Sam said. "He'll go back in the study and get down books and turn pages. I've got a good encyclopedia back there and some medical books I use in damage cases. I suppose he likes the pictures. Sometimes he spends hours back there." Some say Ubul Qasim destroyed his father 2 months before the coming. The shock of death and birth weakened the mother thing, and she died a few years after. His life was confused, moving from relative to relative, slow maturation. Something within him hid from the world until early manhood. Item. The books were puzzling. There was so much in them that was so clearly wrong, but they were not cruel of themselves, only stupid and careless. He remembered the mother thing and wondered why he had hurt her. The father thing was hurt also, but he had not done that. There was no love in the father thing, but the father thing had never hurt him. The books were no help. Alone, unaided by what the world had become and what it meant to him, he made his decision. He made it for the one time and the one thing, putting the rest back, delaying. The pill was effective for a few hours and then it began to wear off. He took another and checked the boy. Randall lay in his bed, small body lost in covers, breathing slowly, evenly, his eyes open. "Where is the mother?" he asked. There were two feelings. Sam had the desire to destroy the boy, and an equal feeling to catch the child up and hold him close. He did neither. He rearranged the covers. "She's gone far away," he said softly to the boy. Randall nodded. Sam straightened the study. The boy had been at his books again. He put them back on the shelves. He went to his own bed. Sleep came quickly. Outside, in the neighborhood, most lights were still on. People stared uneasily at their television screens. There was another confrontation, this time in the Near East. Hands moved closer to the red button, the button that man had made. The president spoke, and tensions eased, for some. The world, for what it was, and what all men had made it, would remain for a while. For Sam, there was a dream. The faces of 1,000 clients came and blended into one sick and ignorant and prejudiced face, a never had and never will face that whined the injustice of life as it spawned children to be supported by the myriad public doles. It was a face that Sam knew well, a face that pleaded for divorce and demanded alimony and plotted rape and confessed murder. It was a face that hated all minorities and majorities of which it was not the leading member, that cursed fate and defrauded welfare. Partly, the face was familiar and he knew it, for it was his own face. It was a dream built of 15 years of practice. It was not a nightmare, for it was far better than life. The dream fit life, though, and at the moment of dreaming, if he could have made a rational choice, if the instinct for life had not been so strong and inbred, he would have chosen death. He came almost to wakefulness once, but he slid back into the well where there was only one tiny circle of light. Anne and the boy were there. They touched him with soft hands. He turned them into the circle of life, and their faces could be seen, and those faces bore the same marks as his client's self-face, cruel, sick, angry, and in pain. Their hands still touched him, and he writhed to escape, revolted at the touch. With horrible pain and with tearing and burning, he wrenched the gorge within him away. He awoke. Only one pair of hands was real. Randall stood by the bed. The boy's hands were laid lightly across the bed, resting and unmoving on Sam's chest. There was something in the boy's face, an awareness, a feeling. Sam could not read it all, but there was satisfaction and accomplishment and perhaps even love. Then expression wandered away. The boy yawned and removed his hands. He walked away, and Sam soon heard the rustle of the silk comforter from the boy's bedroom. A spasm of empty pain came. Sam got up weakly and made it to the kitchen, and took another pill, and sat for a while on the couch until it took effect. He came back past the boy's room and looked in. Randall lay straight in bed. There was a bright sheen of sweat on the child's forehead. His eyes were open, watching and waiting. "I am young," the child said again, plaintively and to no one. "Yes," Sam said softly. "So very young." "There was a head thing," Randall said slowly, searching for words. "Hurt doggy." He reached a small finger out and laid it on Sam's wrist. Fish always hungry, I gave to them. He shook his head. Sea words, can't say them. Confidence came in his voice. I will grow more quickly now. He moved his hands off Sam's wrist and closer to the abdomen. All gone now. All gone every place, he said, and the look of Sam's bedroom came fleetingly again. Sam watched without comprehension. The cold, lost eyes watched him, and the next words turned Sam's blood cold. The boy's voice came up in volume and with a ferocity Sam had never heard before. See things on TV, read them in the books and papers. So many bad things, all hate out there like others hate me. He touched his own small head. So many things in here not ready yet. The eyelids closed tight, and a tiny tear came at each corner. Not sorry. I will grow older, Randall said, his voice a cruel, unhuman promise. There was another who was born in a manger and died on a cross. That one was sheltered for a while, and maturity was unforced. But the new one, the one born for our times, would see man's consuming hate of all others, so consuming that the hate extends even to himself. See it in Alabama and Vietnam, and even in the close world around him. See it on television, and read of it in the newspapers, and then grow unsheltered in this world of mass and hysterical communication. Then plan, then decide. This one would come to maturity and ripen, angry.
You know that old saying about how comedy is tragedy plus time? Horror plus time is like coffee. The longer it brews, the stronger it is. The internal horror here is, well, internal, at least to start with. You see, I have a rich vein of hypochondria in the family. I lost a friend very early. Death, for me, is a lot like that episode of Scrubs, often present, not usually active, frequently eating the donuts, waiting for you. So the idea of not just failing at the perceived eternal biological vigil that detects something that's wrong, but just giving up, just letting it take you, is something I've seen happen. It takes a very long time. It's not easy, but there is choice in there, even though from the outside it looks like there isn't. But then you look at why he's making that choice, and things take a darker turn. This is death as escape, coupled with endurance as penance. The loss of his marriage, the clear, barely contained horror at his son's apparent disability. The perspective 2017 gifts us of that as reductive, damaging, and horrifically prejudiced. A man in a life he doesn't want, who hates himself for that life, and in doing so, sentences himself to an agonizing death as a means of atoning for the guilt and revolt he feels. That level of emotional contortion is positively British. And then there's the supernatural reveal, which sits right on the razor line between overdone and perfect. The Messiah no one notices. A creature writing itself into a book not quite large enough to deal with it, making the best of that, and, as the ending implies, paying a price. Not an antichrist, just a Christ, a product of his times. The child is the father to the man, and here the man is going to have to be the father to the child, for all our sakes. Also, this is one of the very, very few examples of the end, or is it, that actually works. Horror of the body, horror of the mind, horror of the soul, all in one immaculate and slightly clammy, unwell-looking package. Beautifully done. Before we go any further, a very special thanks to Colin Wolcott, who is one of the backers for our Kickstarter. We would also like to thank him for selling us Defects for episode 508. Go back now and give it a listen. It's a cracker of a story. Let's talk about you. You fund us. You are the engine that helps us do what we do. Without your donations, authors don't get paid, staff don't get paid, narrators don't get paid. Our servers go dark. There is no show without you. You are our dilapidated theatre with a heart of gold. You are our venture capitalist with a fondness for powered armour and quips. You are our engine. You help keep us flying. Out of our millions of listeners each year, less than 1% of you donate. 1%. Those generous souls make all the difference. We run 4 weekly shows. We pay our authors SFWA qualifying rates. We pay narrators on 3 of those 4 shows, with the 4th on the way just as soon as we can make it happen. Filling that gap is why we've just launched on Patreon. That and your requests, and please keep them coming. We're on Dwalla now and looking at Venmo because of your feedback. Even paper checks if that's what works for you. We draw the line at Bitcoin, but anything else, please let us know. Over the last 2 years, we've expanded and chosen to lead by example in what we do and how we do it, treating all the talented authors and voices we work with professionally. That means paying them. But to do what we do, we need your help. We know what you're thinking. Uh-oh, here come the ads. We know you have enough socks and stamps and mattresses. That's not what we do. We choose to rely on you. Every week we talk about just $2 a month making a difference, and it does, but not as much of a difference as it did 12 years ago when we got started. Yeah, I know, that number is scary. 12 years ago, $2 would buy you a gallon of gas in the US, or a copy of Wired, or a third of a movie ticket for Revenge of the Sith, and if you timed it really, really well, it would be the good third. Now, not so much. Look, we're not going to give you the just give up a $5 coffee a week guilt trip, because joy is where you find it. Maybe you find it in caffeine, we often do. But if you find it in free audio fiction each and every week, please, be that fuel in our tank, our engine. Standalone donations are always great if that works for you. Those of you who already support us at $2 a month, thank you. You literally make all the difference. If you've been a donor for a while and might be able to top up your donation, amazing, please do. A subscription at $5 a month or more through PayPal or now Patreon, that holds back gravity. Please, help us keep flying, because we've got some great places to take you. We'll return next week with Flash on the Borderlands 38, Letting Go, featuring work by Ruth E.J. Booth, Richard Farron and Samuel Matsoni. Then, as now, will be a product of Escape Artists Inc. and released under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives license. And we leave you with this quote from Eyes Without a Face. The future, madam, is something we needed to get a head start on. See you next week.